Welcome to the deep dive. Think about that notebook maybe sitting on your desk right now,
Hmm.
the one you last used. What if that simple item could tell a much bigger story about sustainability?
Right.
Today we're doing a deep dive into recycled notebooks. They've kind of shifted, haven't they, from this niche eco choice to something much more mainstream, almost essential really for modern stationery companies.
That's exactly right. And what's interesting about our dive today is the perspective. We're looking at this based on a manufacturer's guide.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just the consumer angle, the feel-good part.
Mhm.
It's the practical stuff, the strategy behind why these notebooks are becoming, well, so central to the industry.
Yeah.
It gives you listening a bit of a behind-the-scenes look.
Exactly. So our mission, if you like, is to really get under the hood. What goes into making a recycled notebook? What are the real benefits beyond just, saving trees?
Hmm.
Where do we actually see them being used? And importantly, what should you look out for if you're buying them? All from this manufacturer's viewpoint.
Sounds good.
So let's start right at the beginning. When we say recycled notebook, what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so fundamentally, it's a notebook where the paper inside comes mostly or sometimes even entirely from paper that's already been used.
Right.
Think about your old newspapers, office printouts, maybe even old school work. Instead of landfill, that stuff becomes the raw material for new paper.
Okay.
And that's the core difference from traditional notebooks, which use virgin pulp, stuff made directly from cutting down trees.
Okay, so the obvious plus is fewer trees being cut down. That seems clear.
Yeah,
But this guide, it seems to really emphasize the broader impact. It talks about, yes, less tree harvesting, but also big savings in energy and less water used and just less waste overall.
it's definitely a much bigger picture. Using recycled materials slashes the need for those resource-intensive early stages.
Right.
And, what's really interesting is how the guide tackles the quality question.
Ah, yeah, because that's often the concern, isn't it? Is it going to be flimsy or bleed through?
Exactly. There's this whole idea that recycled paper is, well, inferior. But the guide stresses that modern manufacturing has come a really long way.
Okay.
The quality you get now, it
Mhm.
can absolutely stand up to conventional paper. Sometimes, honestly, it's even better in certain aspects.
Yeah.
You don't have to trade performance for sustainability anymore.
That's a huge point, especially if you're relying on it for work or study. You need it to actually work as a notebook.
Precisely.
So let's get into the materials then. We know the paper's recycled, but are there different kinds of recycled paper? What's actually going into these
Yeah,
things?
the guide breaks it down nicely. There are two main types. First, there's post-consumer waste, PCW.
PCW, okay.
That's exactly what it sounds like. Paper that you, the consumer, have used and then recycled. Think newspapers, magazines, junk mail, office paper that's been printed on, all that stuff from your recycling bin.
Gotcha.
And the guide points out this is, really high value environmentally
Hmm.
because you're directly stopping it from ending up in landfill and closing that loop.
Makes total sense. A proper circular thing. Okay. And the other type?
The second one is pre-consumer waste, sometimes called post-industrial waste.
Pre-consumer. Okay.
So picture a paper factory or a printing press. During production, there are always offcuts, trimmings, paper scraps, maybe misprints or overruns. It's waste generated before it ever reaches a consumer.
Okay. Clean waste, essentially.
Exactly. It hasn't been used in the way PCW has, but recycling it still prevents industrial waste and saves resources compared to using virgin materials.
Right.
Both types are important. And the guide mentions manufacturers usually label the percentage of recycled content, often specifying PCW content too. That helps you know what you're getting.
That is helpful, yeah. Knowing what those labels mean. Now, it's not just the paper inside, is it? The guide talks about covers, too. Sustainable covers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A truly sustainable notebook looks at the whole package. The guide mentions things like recycled cardboard or craft paper being really popular for covers.
Okay. Like that brown, sturdy paper feel.
Yeah, exactly. It's durable, it has a nice sort of natural look, and it avoids using new paperboard. So the outside matches the inside, environmentally speaking.
And it's not just paper-based covers either, right? I think the guide mentioned fabrics.
Yes, definitely. Things like natural fibers, cotton, sometimes hemp, even bamboo are being used more now for covers.
Interesting.
Adds a different texture, a different feel, and keeps this sustainability focus. And then there's this really cool area of upcycled materials.
Upcycled, so using waste again, but in a creative way.
Pretty much. Think repurposed textiles, maybe offcuts from clothing manufacturing, or even scraps of leather from other industries.
Wow.
It takes waste reduction a step further and often gives the notebook a really unique, one-of-a-kind look. It becomes a selling point in itself.
That's clever, turning potential waste into a feature. What about the really small stuff, like the ink, the binding? Does the guide get into that?
It does. You might not think about it, but a responsible maker does. The guide highlights the shift towards using things like vegetable-based inks.
Instead of petroleum-based.
Yeah. Exactly. And adhesives made from renewable sources. Even the binding method matters. Things like sewn binding or using wire binding that's easily recyclable are pointed out as more sustainable choices than some older methods that might use glues that are harder to recycle.
Huh. So it really goes down to the details.
Every little bit contributes to the overall footprint.
Okay, so we've got a good picture of what these notebooks are made of. Let's pivot to the why. Why choose one? The guide lays out some pretty strong benefits, starting with the environment, obviously.
Yeah, and this is where the numbers get quite striking. The guide suggests making recycled paper can use somewhere between 30 to 50% less energy than making paper from virgin wood.
30 to 50%, that's huge.
It is, because you're skipping that whole initial process, logging, transporting logs, pulping virgin wood. That's all very energy intensive.
Right.
Plus, significant water savings. Water usage drops dramatically. And the number that always stands out, the guide mentions saving around 17 mature trees for every ton of recycled paper produced.
Wow, 17 trees per ton. When you think about how much paper we use.
Exactly. It adds up incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And these kinds of figures, they really resonate with people who are looking to make more conscious choices. You, as a consumer, can see a tangible impact.
Absolutely. But it's not just the planet, is it? The guide also talks about benefits for businesses, brand enhancement.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Choosing recycled stationery sends a signal. Customers, more and more, link eco-friendly products with being responsible, with quality, with being sort of forward-thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tangible way for a company to show its commitment to corporate social responsibility, or CSR. And that's increasingly important not just to customers, but to investors, partners, even employees.
So using a recycled notebook in a meeting or giving them out, it subtly says something positive about the company's values.
Precisely. And that links to the next point the guide makes.
Yeah.
Market differentiation.
Standing out from the crowd.
Yeah. I mean, the stationery market is packed, right?
Yeah.
Offering recycled notebooks gives a brand a clear edge. Sustainability isn't just a nice to have anymore. For many people, it's a deciding factor.
Okay.
So if your brand prioritizes that, you can connect more strongly with those customers, build loyalty. It makes you memorable for the right reasons.
It becomes part of your brand identity. Okay, so we know the what and the why. Where are we actually seeing these notebooks used most often? The guide points out a few key areas.
Well, corporate branding is a big one. Companies are using customized recycled notebooks a lot now as promotional items, client gifts.
Right, aligning the gift with their own green policies.
Exactly. It ensures their swag, so to speak, reflects well on their reputation, especially with partners or clients who also care about sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
It's just good business sense now.
Makes perfect sense. A branded plastic pen versus a branded recycled notebook sends very different messages. What about education?
Schools and universities are another major area mentioned in the guide. They're increasingly opting for recycled notebooks.
Driven by students, maybe?
Yeah. Often, yes. Student initiatives pushing for more sustainable campuses play a big role. But the guide also suggests it's becoming a teaching tool in itself.
How so?
Well, using recycled materials in the classroom directly links the curriculum, maybe lessons about ecology or resource management, to a tangible, everyday practice. It makes the lesson real.
Ah, I see. Walking the talk, basically.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's just personal use and gifting.
Yeah, just regular folks buying them.
Right. Individuals are making that choice more often for their own journaling, note-taking, planning, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So you see them much more commonly in bookstores, gift shops, online. It caters to that growing general desire for more sustainable options in our daily lives and for gifts that feel a bit more thoughtful and responsible.
Okay, so let's say someone listening is now thinking, all right, maybe I should look into these, either for their business or school or just for themselves. What are the crucial things the manufacturer's guide says to keep in mind when buying? Key considerations.
Number one, according to the guide, is quality assurance.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical.
Right, back to that earlier point, it still has to be a good notebook.
Exactly. Just because it's recycled doesn't mean you accept lower quality. The guide stresses choosing suppliers who consistently deliver. The paper needs to be durable, take ink well without excessive bleeding or feathering, and look good. It has to meet those basic performance expectations.
Makes sense. You don't want pages falling out or your pen skipping. What else? The guide mentioned certifications,
Yes, environmental certifications are really important. They act as a sort of guarantee for the consumer.
like proof it's genuinely what it claims to be.
Precisely. The guide highlights a few key ones. FSC Forest Stewardship Council is a big one. That tells you the paper, even if it includes some virgin fiber mixed in, or the virgin fiber used in the original paper, comes from responsibly managed forests.
Okay, FSC. Good to know.
SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, is another respected one in that space. And maybe most directly relevant is a recycled content certification.
Which just states the percentage.
Yeah, it clearly tells you how much of the material is actually recycled,
Hmm?
and sometimes breaks down the PCW percentage, too. Seeing those logos gives you confidence you're buying a legitimately sustainable product. It builds trust.
So look for those little logos.
Okay.
Got it. Anything else the guide flags as important?
Customization options. This is especially key for the corporate and educational markets.
Being able to make it your own.
Right. The ability to add your company logo, choose specific cover designs or colors, maybe select different binding types, or get specific sizes or page rulings like dots or grids.
Okay.
The guide points out that this flexibility makes recycled notebooks much more appealing for bulk orders or specific uses. It allows organizations to get exactly what they need while still making the sustainable choice. It aligns the eco option with their practical needs and brand.
So it removes another potential barrier to choosing recycled. Okay, let's try and sort of pull this all together then.
Yeah.
We've seen recycled notebooks really move from the fringes into the mainstream. It seems driven by a real demand for greener options. They're made using paper diverted from waste streams that PCW and pre-consumer stuff, and often have other eco features like sustainable covers and inks. The benefits are pretty clear. Big environmental savings in energy, water, trees, plus points for brand image and a way to stand out in the market.
Yeah, a strong package of benefits.
And we're seeing them everywhere now. Company swag, university bookstores, personal desks.
They're becoming ubiquitous.
And if you're buying, the key takeaways seem to be check the quality, look for those certifications like FSC or recycled content labels, and see what customization is possible if you need it.
That sums it up nicely, and it really does reflect this bigger shift, doesn't it? Towards, well, more conscious consumerism and businesses taking ethical practices more seriously. It feels like a lasting change.
Yeah, it does. So maybe the next time you pick up a notebook, just pause for a second. That simple choice, it actually carries some weight environmentally and maybe even for a brand's image. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other everyday things we barely think about, might hold similar potential? Opportunities to choose more sustainable options without really losing anything in terms of, quality or usefulness.
That's a great thought to end on. Where else can these small, conscious choices add up?
Something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure.
Until our next exploration.